that it's a critical. And so we have two of the ablest and most active people that have been working on the affordable housing issue crisis over the years. And Josh Spring, the executive director of the Homeless Coalition of Greater Cincinnati, and John Schrider, who is the current chair of Advocates for Affordable Housing and a longtime leader of legal aid in Cincinnati, working on issues such as rent and evictions. And so they're here today to give us an update on where we are with the affordable housing crisis. We have a new council and a new mayor, and we recently had the mayor and the new council members on, who seem to profess a lot of interest in the affordable housing issue. But when it comes down to the money issue, sometimes not so much. So we'll hear from these two able people about this. Once again, we're coming to you via Zoom. We hope at some time to get back to Christ Church Cathedral in person. Our next forum will be the 7th of April, week before Easter. But so let's get to our two experts and leaders in this affordable housing issue. I don't know who wants to go first on this, whether John or Josh, or whether you've talked with one another about issues you're going to cover here. Do you have a preference?
Yeah, I think Josh volunteered to go first, which is great.
Yeah, yeah, I can go first.
Well, there's so many aspects to this, and then one of them is where are we in new initiatives with regard to funding affordable housing. So Josh, take it from here.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for taking part in the forum, and thank you to Bill and Alice for having us. I guess the place to start, and certainly I'm a broken record when it comes to this, but we are short in our county more than 40,000 affordable homes. 28,000 of those are needed within our city. And when we say affordable, we mean that housing for which households are paying no more than 30% of their income for their rent or mortgage. And specifically that gap is the 40,000 and 28,000 in the city. That shortage is specific to households with incomes at or below 30% of the area median income. So median income is the income at which half of us are above it, half of us are below it, and 30% of that is roughly minimum wage. And so that is where the greatest need is. And as hopefully everybody knows, last year, a collection of us collectively put an issue on the ballot to fund affordable housing dollars with at least $50 million each year to build and preserve affordable housing. That did not pass against significant opposition, but that was not the end of the road for us. We have since written a new version of charter amendment to fund affordable housing. We have sent this out to, at this point, hundreds of people. Many folks have given us feedback and edits on that draft, and we are now communicating with council members about this. We would like to see the new city council with at least a 6 of 9 vote, 6 members of council vote to put affordable housing back on the ballot for funding. And in terms of kind of the current status of affordable housing, I can say more about the ballot initiative a little bit later. But in terms of the current status, certainly the press of issue 3, we got 9,500 people to sign the petition to put it on the ballot in the middle of, really at the height of the pandemic, predominantly in the middle of the winter. And it made housing a significant issue in the city council election and candidates nights, etc. And so all of the members of our current city council have spoken positively about affordable housing. They've all said that they're committed to affordable housing. Of course, as we know, the proof is in action, not words. And so we believe that this council has the greatest potential to do good for affordable housing, to do good in that way for our neighborhoods, has the greatest potential of any council that we've had before. Doesn't mean we're saying that we believe everything that they are doing is great, or we believe everything they will do is great. The proof is in the action, but we believe that they have great potential. And that they have a desire to understand the issue more than previous councils have. So just to deal with a couple of contextual items, as we have continued to push for funding of affordable housing, at times there's been announcements that have come out of City Hall where the tagline is that whatever the announcement is, that there's an action being taken that is supportive of housing. And so one of those recently, a couple of weeks back, we saw the mayor and some members of council announce what they called a funding package for affordable housing. And soon after that was announced, we got calls and emails from some folks saying, oh, is this a really good thing? Does this mean that the problem is solved? And the truthful answer is that we consider what, and I'll talk in detail about this. There were several items noted in the mayor's announcement. In some, the message was that council is putting tens of millions of dollars into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. But it's important to break that down. So of the approximately 50 to 60 million that they talked about, 34 million of that would be in what's called a HUD 108 loan. HUD is Department of Housing and Urban Development, part of the federal government. And a 108 loan is, as it sounds, a loan. And in fact, it is a loan that, to my knowledge, we've not been approved for yet. So it's not actual money. We have to be approved for it. And two, if we are approved for it, we're actually borrowing against future allocations of community development block grant dollars. Those are dollars that we can use, we get from the federal government to use to develop our communities. So we would be essentially spending that money early, but we would have to pay it back. And so that means recipients of the money, say an affordable housing developer, would have to pay it back also. And while loan funds such as that are useful, they are limited, because in order to be able to pay back the loan, you have to charge a rent that allows you to do that. And charging that rent means that we miss folks with the low incomes that we actually need to reach. So it doesn't meet that target I talked about early on in this. The second piece that the mayor discussed is $15 million in private funds. And our understanding is that those too would be used as loan money. So again, nothing wrong with that. That can be useful, but it will not build housing at the income levels where we have the gap. Also, there was talk that any surplus funds at the end of each fiscal year in the city could go to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Again, that sounds good. That requires that there be a surplus, and it requires each time the council vote to do so, to send it to housing. And then finally, a one-time allocation of $5 million from federal COVID dollars to the trust fund. And so, whereas that was recently announced, almost all of that package was thought of and created actually by the last administration. So you can go back and look at city council records a year ago, and they were talking about these exact same things as they were opposing issue 3. And the way that we look at this is we believe that it is a good gesture from the mayor. It is hopefully a gesture of positive relationship to come and continue, but it should not be overstated. The impact that these dollars can have should not be overstated. What we need, and developers across the board that are involved in affordable housing, both for-profit and nonprofit developers across the board, will tell us what we need is a consistent and significant annual allocation of funds to the trust fund that will be disseminated in the form of grants, money that does not have to be paid back. Because again, organizations now don't so much struggle with getting the loans they need. They struggle with being able to have loans and have rents that reach communities that are struggling. And so we need to have money that doesn't get paid back. Doesn't get paid back financially, but certainly would pay dividends in our neighborhoods and in the well-being of our communities. So we are working to, we are regularly talking with members of city council. We are also in good relationship with our partners in organized labor, AFL-CIO, especially, as well as AFSCME. We've had conversations with the fire union. So as well as with issue 3, we had some disagreement there. We have figured that out, and we are on the same side. And we believe that each of our needs are important, and so we want to find a solution that takes care of the housing needs, that helps the fire department and some other parts of the city that are struggling. The fact is that until we invest significant annual dollars into affordable housing, homelessness will continue to worsen, struggle. People, more and more families will still struggle. We still see approximately 90% of families that call seeking shelter are turned away on a daily basis. Last year, we had more than 152 people in our area die young because of homelessness. Their average age was, I believe, 52 years old. And so and even now we hear from service providers and individuals that if an individual or family is lucky enough to come up on a long waiting list and get access to a housing voucher, that many families and individuals can no longer find a place that will accept the voucher. The deficit is so significant that even that, which at one point was such a strong lifeline, now for many goes unused because they can't find a place to use it. We are in dire straits, and we continue to, they continue to get worse, but we have the ability, we have the resources to fix it. We just have to make it happen. And we're committed, along with many other organizations, to seeing it through until we as a city, looks like our audio has stopped. We're committed to seeing it through until we as a city are funding affordable housing every year to an extent that regular folks can feel it in their neighborhoods, can see that something is happening, can see that the city cares about our people. We're not looking for kind of little investments here and there. We're looking for something that will be truly transformative in the lives of our citizens and residents. Thanks.
Thanks, Josh. John, do you want to take it up from there, or?
Well, yeah, because I'll just take a minute or two, because, you know, I never tire of hearing Josh talk about affordable housing and the need for the trust fund and fully funding the trust fund. You know, his dedication and knowledge is just astounding, and it's great to have him as an advocate for affordable housing. So thanks for inviting me. And you know, first off, I just want to note that I think Sally Duffy is attending this, and so I have to. Speaking of people who are doing and have done amazing things, Sister Sally is certainly one of those people, and I have to apologize for not attending the event yesterday that where you were so appropriately honored. It's great to see you, and I apologize that I couldn't make it. I think Bill hit it on the head right at the beginning with the intro, and which is that there is a lot of talk in City Hall, and it's good talk about doing big things about affordable housing. You know, I've been in Cincinnati a long time. I've never heard this level of talk about trying to do things to deal with the affordable housing issue and the gap. So that is great. But as Bill said, and Josh too, you got to put your money where your mouth is, because it's going to take a lot of money to put a dent in this problem. So two quick points. One about what has the city been doing? What's been our performance on providing affordable housing over the last few years? The city is completing a study right now that shows that the number of affordable housing units being developed every year over the last 5 years in Cincinnati is around 250 units. And the measure they're using for that is housing that's affordable by households under 80% and under 60% of area median income. So 250 units a year, it's not enough. And a couple additional points. You know, when you look at the gap, if you do 250 units a year, you'll never close it. The other thing is that this housing is mostly for people who are in less need than the lower income households that are most in need of housing. You know, what we have study after study, including Housing Our Future, that shows the need for affordable housing is greatest for families with incomes under 50% of median income and under 30% of median income. And I think it's important to remember that a family that has an income, a household that has an income of 30% of AMI, you are under that threshold if you are working full time at a job that pays $15 an hour. So, you know, we're talking about lower people working at relatively lower wage jobs, but jobs that by some people's count seem like they're pretty good. And they can't afford housing in Cincinnati. We're also talking, of course, about senior citizens and people with disabilities whose incomes tend to be even lower than that. So why aren't we meeting that need? Well, the reason we're not meeting that need is like what Josh was saying. Loans don't get you there. We need grant money. The only way you can make housing affordable for lower income households is with grant money. Tax credits are part of the solution. Loans are part of the solution, but without grant money to write down the cost of operations, rents will never be affordable by the lowest income households that need the help the most. And so that's why it's so important about this 108 loan. The 108 loan is just a loan, and it's not going to be grants, and it'll help some, but it's not going to get us where we need to be. So that's where we are right now. 250 units a year, and not even for the people most in need. And the other point I want to make quickly is I think probably everybody on the call has heard about the roadmap for increasing home ownership, with an emphasis on increasing home ownership for African Americans. And I'm not set up right this second to share a screen. If I think it might be possible for Alice to put up a one-pager that summarizes the roadmap proposals. But I think everybody here on this call has heard about this proposal, and it's essential. The homeownership rate in Cincinnati is not as high as it should be, and the homeownership rate for African Americans is less than half of what it is for others, Caucasians, whites. And we have to do something about that. That's a result of discrimination. There's no doubt about it. Over the years, and continuing to this day, even in the tax abatement program, we have programs and policies that privilege people who are better off. And homeownership is a way to as you know, to increase wealth. So it's something we really have to work on. So Alice kindly has put up this summary of the plan, summarized. It's a longer document that goes into more detail. I'm working on the assumption that you all have heard about this. I'll also add that this is something that we can only accomplish, the kinds of help for existing homeowners and the kind of help to get people with the help they need to buy homes. This can only happen if we fund the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. One of the goals of the trust fund is to increase and support homeownership of lower income families. So this is completely tied up with our goals on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So with that, maybe what I should do is just, since we have a small group here of well-informed, greatly informed people, maybe we should have more discussion and less and end the presentation part. See what comments and other things people have to say.
Well, thank you, John. Yeah, the thing that discourages me is that this Applied Information Resources did the first homeless study in 1987, and we labeled one of the reasons for that was we had an affordable housing crisis. So really, we've been living with an affordable housing crisis since that time. And of course, during that era, back in the mid-1980s, that was when Ronald Reagan and Congress were drastically cutting federal housing assistance programs. And of course, the federal government had been the primary source of money for a whole variety of housing programs over the years. Now that has picked up some and then dropped some, but it never has reached the percentage level that it did, say, during the Great Society or the Lyndon Johnson years or prior to that. So we've been living with this affordable housing crisis. I remember several years ago when John and Josh and a whole bunch of the advocates for affordable housing were just formulating an initiative for getting more money from the city, that we had an annual meeting where it focused on cities like Baltimore, who had provided some more direct money from their city for affordable housing. I think that needs to be hammered to the city some more, that the other cities have done much better than we have in terms of dealing with this long-term crisis. The other thing, and I'll give up the floor, I'm talking too much, that during this last campaign, which was very sad that the initiative went down, the city did its damnedest to say that the city was going to fall apart and we were going to not be able to fund the police and the fire department and basic services. We can't have another initiative that receives that kind of treatment from the city. So I think, you know, I was bucked as well when I heard from some of the new city council members their interest in this issue. Getting some of those folks, or all of them, on board, or most of them on board, and the new mayor, I think is a critical factor here. So I'll shut up there, but that's been my perspective, that we not only got to get some more money for affordable housing, but the city has to, as Josh has mentioned, do more on this. Any folks have some comments or?
Yeah, Josh, we'll get some echo here. You said there's going to be another ballot issue. Will that be sort of the same? What will be in that ballot issue?
Sure. So we are working to get city council to put affordable housing back on the ballot. So that's still an effort in progress. The draft now that we've got responds to a lot of the critique that we received about what became issue 3. So the current draft provides some restructuring of the oversight board. It also provides some more greater division or specification in monies available to home ownership possibilities, just to name a couple of differences. And if anybody is interested in learning more about the current draft, you can certainly really can reach out to John or myself, and we can have a conversation. We can share the information, whatever you would find helpful.
I think what got people last time was like that number, $50 million. Is that, how is that going to be finessed?
Well, so I think it's important to for everybody to know that if we are successful in allocating even $50 million to affordable housing, it will not be nearly enough. And it's not the only thing that we need to do. So to put that in perspective, at a minimum, it costs about $100,000 to develop a unit of housing. That's at this point probably somewhat of a conservative estimate. And so if you take 50 million and you divide that by 100,000, that equals 500. And so we say we use those dollars well to leverage outside dollars, and we double our money. So that's 1,000. We believe it would be transformational in our city to develop or preserve 1,000 units of housing each year. But we shouldn't forget that we're short 28,000. And so there will be other steps that we have to take to protect households from eviction, to prevent displacement, to use our property tax incentives, tax abatement incentives better. We'll have to do all of those things, but our goal is still to generate around $50 million. We think that that's the level at which people, regular folks, will start to actually feel the change in our city versus just hearing about it on the airwaves.
Yeah, and if I could add an additional thing to Josh's good comments there. So I think city council, our new city council, is coming to realize that if we are going to do the things we need to do for housing, for recreation, for the fire department, and other essential services, we are going to have to raise the earnings tax. There's no doubt about that, and that's a hard thing for a newly elected city council, virtually all of whom are new or almost brand new to city council. But it's just the reality, and you know, without increasing the earnings tax sum and having a big chunk devoted to affordable housing, we're just not going to get there.
Yes, yeah, and it's worth noting that our earnings tax as a city is 1.8%. Every other major city in our state has an earnings tax of 2.5%. And so we have to say is, can we really have the city we want if we don't ensure we have enough money to operate it? And we don't think we can.
Just the earnings tax, though, aren't we in a bit of a bind because people are working remotely now, and aren't they, how are they, that issue seems to be, are they collecting that earnings tax from Cincinnati workers?
Yeah, so folks that worked in the city but lived outside of the city for years have paid income or earnings tax. And with the pandemic and then working from home and their home is outside the city, people challenged that. And the decision in Columbus was that people in that situation do not have to pay earnings tax. So if you continue to work inside the city, but you live outside the city, you still pay earnings tax. But if you're doing both outside the city, you don't. And so that certainly will have an effect on how much we collect in earnings tax. Other people should look at this, but I believe UC's Economic Institute last year predicted in the current years that we're in now that might have a roughly a 16 to 20% negative impact. So don't quote, people shouldn't quote me on that. You should go read it yourself. But there is work being done on predicting it.
This may not have direct impact on the new initiative. And I fully agree with both John and Josh that we need 50 million from the city no matter what. But when we were contemplating the earlier initiative, we were thinking of tying it to some incentives for developers, a tax on developers, either a tax on developers or an incentive that developers add affordable housing to their developments if they were larger. Has there been any further discussion of that? Or, the city for years, I think, has been running scared and said, well, we'll support tax abatements for any development, and a lot of those developments have been negative on Cincinnati's neighborhoods. Peasley has come up with a pretty good plan in terms of positive developments for neighborhoods, as well as Damon Lynch III has been working on that issue, I think, as well. But John or Josh, have there been any more discussions about those kind of programs that would require developers to really be involved in providing affordable housing? no matter what.
Well, let me jump in real quick, and then I'm sure Josh can add to it. So one thing we know for sure is that in order to increase the earnings tax, you have to have a charter amendment. Now, there are other things that the city hall can and should do to promote affordable housing that do not require a charter amendment. So, yeah, those other tools are out there needed and need to be implemented. But you know, the reason for the charter amendment is it's the only way you can deal with the earnings tax issue.
That's right. Yeah, there, you know, there are other, as I said before, generating even $50 million from an earnings tax amendment to the charter. We believe would make transformative change, but it will not fix the problem. It won't end the problem. And to do that, we have to institute other changes. And so, you know, while right now as we are really focused on getting the funding secure so that we can see production of housing in a significant way and saving housing. Yeah, we need to use our incentives better. We need to require that if you get a tax abatement incentive, a zoning incentive, really any incentive from the city, you should have to do affordable housing. We've got to stop giving ourselves away for free. We've got to realize that as a city and a people, we're worth more. We are worth more than giving ourselves to every developer that shows up at the door. We've got to stop doing that if we want to have a healthy, thriving city where everyone has access to basic necessities.
Other comments or questions that people have for Josh?
Yeah, John and Josh, it's thank you. You know, I mean, candidly, my only concern is how can we make sure we do this together so that we're not split and that we've got a groundswell and a commitment. You know, I think clearly. I didn't go to any meeting where people didn't recognize there was a need for more affordable housing or participate in any committee or group. I think everybody recognizes that. I think it's, you know, how can we ensure, particularly, I think I do feel like this city council is committed and I think the mayor is too. So I'm hoping that we can forge a path together. You know, my other concern, and John, as usual, we contacted legal aid this morning because we're seeing some apartment buildings in East Price Hill, you know, that aren't full, and we're concerned about obviously the outside investors. And we also know that those buildings just keep depreciating, and I don't mean just depreciating on a balance sheet. I mean, they eventually become unusual without significant gap funding. And as you well know, gap funding is like the grants you're trying to get now. It's hard to come by, and plus the operational expenses that are needed. I think we all agree that those are critical factors in moving forward. So I'm just wondering, you know, I mean, clearly all these securitized, you know, mortgages that, hit us in the foreclosure crisis are coming back to haunt us. And I mean, we see that with Raineth, but you can go down the list of and some of this is also how can we work proactively to get ahead of this so we're not paying for it at a much more costly rate, if that question makes sense.
Absolutely. And, landlords from out of town, LLCs and other
Yes.
organizations are buying up properties all over the place in Cincinnati. Huge problem. And, I think part of the solution is a well-funded trust fund, because we need to incentivize and make it possible for our developers here in Cincinnati, both nonprofits and the for-profit developers with good track records, to step in and be a counterweight to the out-of-town investors. I think that's the key to saving our neighborhoods.
Yes.
So you're exactly right. And as far as getting everybody on the same page,
Well, and I don't think we'll get everybody on the same page, but I think we at least need to have at least over 50% on the same
yeah,
page.
right. Well, we can't have a repeat of the last time, right? Where City Hall,
that's
City
it.
Hall is fighting tooth and nail. That won't work, and that's not the goal. The goal is for council to figure out that we need to move ahead with this.
And that would be my hope and prayer too. So
yeah, our goal and very much our work at this moment is all bent towards being together. And so we are very regularly meeting with a group of city council people about this. We've included other parts of the city because there's needs in a variety of areas. And I couldn't agree more that a big threat are these companies that are buying both our single family residences and our multifamily residences, and either putting people out, or if they're vacant, they're sitting on them, or they're doing a little bit of repair and selling them for high dollar. And I've got to believe some of that happens, one, because as we heard the developer on Court Street who was pushing people out say, we're an eviction friendly city, so this is the place to invest. The other reason is we've sort of got a vacuum, like if we've got, say, mom and pop landlords in our neighborhoods that are struggling to keep their buildings in good shape. If we had a well-funded trust fund, we could provide them with monies to keep them in good shape, monies to avoid the foreclosure, monies to get out of crisis, so that when those investors come around, they're empowered to say, no, thank you. They're empowered to say, no, we're gonna stay here. And as we've organized with tenants fighting to save their housing over the years, one of the most common questions or hopes that comes out of people is, we've got folks with a lot of different abilities in this building. Why can't we just own the building? What if we owned it and maintained it? And the answer is, well, you could. There just has to be money for it. We've got a lot of good people in our city. And if we put money into this, we can figure it out.
And I'll add, so the port, it's so great that the port has purchased the Raineth inventory, 190 units approximately of dwelling units in Cincinnati, and is working on a plan to move some of those units at least to home ownership by the current residents. But there are limits to the money that the port has, right? And
they've leveraged their money, John.
Right. And
So,
the port's
I mean, I think it's a good risky leverage, but
yeah, but the port's going to need the trust fund too to keep doing stuff like that.
yes.
Right. That's right.
John, I think you were involved. In fact, I think AHA wrote a letter against this. There was a recent initiative put forward by City Council to have change the zoning laws a little bit to have a wider scope of housing, but it didn't really affect a lot of the neighborhoods that needed to be affected. Can you run that by folks a little bit, why we were against that?
Yeah, so I think the punchline is that if we are going to use zoning to incentivize more dense residential development, we want to make sure that we have mixed income housing as a result of that. And by mixed income housing, I mean housing that's both higher end and housing that's affordable by lower income households, truly lower income households. And, that's something that's done in other cities, and it's something that we should be doing here. The proposal that went down to defeat, was one that was started quite some time ago. And I think at the end of the day, with all the opposition from neighborhood groups and many others, that the council committee realized that it needed to step back and do a redo of this zoning density proposal that takes into account both the need for affordable housing and also making sure that there's an appropriate amount of input from individual neighborhoods. So I think it's a big task, but the goal was not to defeat increased density and zoning. The goal is to do it in a good way that benefits our whole community.
Josh, in terms of the coalition building, I know there's been terrific, I've been sort of out of it, but in terms of working with the unions, getting them on board, is the religious community still is involved, Mark and various groups like that, correct? Jan Michelle Lemon-Kearney, who's a member of Christ Church Cathedral, I thought she was going to be in on this forum, but getting the religious community behind this, I think is very important too.
Yeah. So the Metropolitan Area Religious Coalition of Cincinnati remains one of the leading organizations in this campaign. And we are, some people know Reverend Nelson Pierce. So he is a significant part of what we're doing. And I mean, I could give a long answer, but the short answer is yes, the faith community, congregations, judicatories, places of worship are integral to this and are a part of what we are doing. And certainly if somebody here, on Facebook land is listening to this and you think that your place of worship would like to be a part of this, please contact us, because the answer is yes.
Any other new coalition members? As Sally Duffy was saying, we gotta have as huge a coalition as possible here.
Yeah, and also, if I might add, kind of relative to what you're saying, Bill, and to Sister Sally's comment, sometimes folks look at it and say, oh, well, I'm not an expert on development or affordable housing development or zoning or whatever. I'm not an expert on those things, so what can I offer? And you can certainly offer a lot, because housing is one of the most basic of needs. So if you know about healthcare, if you know about raising children, if you know about just supporting neighbors, if anything that you know about applies to this. So we really need a strong body of people. We have strong people, and we want to work with you.
John, any further insights?
I think this has been a really good discussion, and we just have to keep pushing. And I think we're going to get there. And I
We got to
appreciate
get there
everybody's
soon.
interest.
Some of us old people want us to see something happen before we pass off the off the map. But I think, you know, we're at a critical juncture, but we seem to have ingredients here that we didn't have before. And so we've got to remain optimistic that something can happen and build this kind of coalition to do this. Obviously, this is a multifaceted issue. You know, it's an income issue as well as a getting more units of housing. So things like getting the child tax credit and things like that are critical. So on the federal level, we've got to be promoting a whole variety of ways to raise the income level, minimum wage, etc. But this need to get more affordable housing units is staring us right in the face, and it has been for many years. So we really need leaders like Sally Duffy, Josh Spring, John Schrider, and others that have been working on this for years, but still have the stamina and energy and brain power to make this happen. So we want to thank you all. Of course, this is not going to be the last thing we do on housing, that's for sure. So we'll be returning to this issue, I'm sure, many times to come. Week before Easter. So there, we've got a lot of issues related to campaign reform and gerrymandered districts, et cetera, that are staring us as well as in the face. So we may be dealing with some of those in the next forums to come up. But I want to thank Josh and John for their long-standing work on this issue and on a variety of fronts. We're thankful to have this kind of leadership in our community. And we'll get this word around. More people seem to participate today, pick up on this on the web, etc. So we hope to get this word out. So thank you again, and we'll see you all shortly, unless John or Josh have a final word for us.
Well, thanks so much for inviting us and for all the participation.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Take care.